Welcome, everyone. This is our June Planning Board meeting, and calling the meeting at 6:34. First is the attendance. We'll go in sequence, probably starting with Rick.
Rick Kraus. John Gemignani.
Deepa Limaye.
Trey Taylor.
We have 3 of our board members who have an excused absence, and they have conveyed it ahead of time with our town clerk. All right, we will go to the item number 2, approval of agenda. If there are any amendments to the agenda? All in favor? Can I get a motion to adopt?
Make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you both. Item number C.
We got to vote.
Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item number C, minutes from the month of May. Are there any amendments to the minutes that were presented?
Go ahead. I don't have any changes.
Anybody?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from May 20 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And I'll say real quickly, Rick had one correction to make to the minutes where there was a bullet point that wasn't fully completed. So that correction had been made, and that is what's shown there in front of you. Yep. Just a FYI.
Yep. Thank you, Mattison.
Of course.
All right. Item number D, old business, and I request our our town staff to present this item.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the last planning board meeting, our town clerk presented the updated proposed planning board rules of procedure, and you guys had a good discussion on a few of those items. So those changes are reflected in your updated packet and are highlighted in yellow. I will like to point out one of the discussion items that you guys had was about the term limits for chair and vice chair. And so from rewatching that meeting and being in attendance, it was left as is, to where the chair and vice chair will just have 2 term limits, and then you have to roll off, and then that member will serve as an ex officio member. You guys also discussed having no term limits, and then in addition to that, you discussed, if someone was a vice chair, their term was up, they could go to chair position, and then if the chair was up, they could go to vice chair. So as it states now, it's what it was originally proposed as. So watching the meeting, there was really no decision on that. Now I know Chair Farris had looked at it and he was comfortable where it was, and I think you guys were kind of comfortable with a lot of things, so I just wanted to bring that up. It's as it is originally, but we can always bring that section back real quick if we need to make modifications to it. But that is for you all to discuss what your comfort level is with it now.
Yeah, I think once we had the discussion, it was more clear. I don't think there was any ambiguity. It was probably more centered around just being unfamiliar with some of the phraseology.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think we're pretty comfortable with it, and I would assume just leave the language the way it was. But
okay.
But the one thing about having not to revisit that same long discussion that we had for future planning boards, just maybe take a second look at if we can make that more concise and tighten it up, or even put a little bit more context to it so it's more user-friendly.
Okay.
For future planning boards.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
We've had our education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're well aware of what it means, and now that the clerks are assisting us much more in the planning board process, I think we'll have that be part of our education piece for new and upcoming board members as they come online. So then if you guys are comfortable with that and the additions, then we would just want a motion for you guys to adopt the rules of procedure, and then they will go forward to the Board of Commissioners for final approval.
Right. Can we get a motion to adopt the proposed planning board rules of procedure?
I move that we adopt the rules of procedure and convey them on to the Board of Commissioners for their final approval.
I'd second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The second item was about the decision on the planning board goals for 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. Another old business item from the last meeting. So since we were pushed back with our work plan from the beginning of the year, we're pushing it to now. The goal of this is to really come up with ideas on goals that you think are achievable for this year. And a part of that, Chair Farris will be giving a report or an update to the Board of Commissioners at our next week's Board of Commissioner meeting. So there was some general discussion last time, and then I also have, depending on Rick, your comfort, I know you had some ideas depending on if you want to bring those forward, or if you want to kind of stick with what the rough outline is now, or if you want to, again, it's up to you guys what your comfort level is and what you want to achieve for 2025. Again, from what I captured from the meeting last month, I captured that into the work plan. So it's your plan. We want you to make the most out of it, depending on what you want to do this year.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I had a couple of questions and then some comments. Just to confirm, so the planning horizon for these objectives is the end of calendar year 2025?
Correct. Yep. So this will be revisited again in January 2026.
Okay, and I assume that therefore we would be having some activity around that in November, December of this year timeframe?
Potentially. What typically happens, and this year has been kind of weird with having an interim manager and more focus on our board retreat. Typically, the planning board chair and or vice chair will come to the board retreat and give a presentation on what they want to work on for the next year. So they can typically work with us at staff level or work with you guys to propose a general work plan for the upcoming year. So typically, this is kind of vetted out and ready for the board retreat because they typically like an update from what you guys are working on or what your goals are. And again, this year was just kind of weird.
Right, and they actually need to approve our work plan, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
No, this is for you guys.
Okay.
In the past, they had, when the Board of Commissioners used to have a liaison specific to each advisory board.
Okay.
Then they kind of got away from that, and then they brought on the organizational advisory board. So they've kind of changed that a little bit, but this is your plan and your plan only. So what you want on it is what you want. And if there's things in there where it requires you to have additional coordination, it could include better coordination with the Board of Commissioners or with other advisory boards. Again, it's what you want to make of it, and then the amount of time and dedication you want to have with it.
Okay.
Well, since Daniel's not here, and you had a good suggestion, you had another suggestion. I think Daniel said he was going to take those recommendations individually, and he'll be back in town, or I think so he'll be available Thursday and to talk with the board members individually.
Right.
Sure, that's fine. That's perfectly fine for you guys to figure it
He'll
out.
aggregate that information and present it.
Okay.
But I'm pretty comfortable with where we are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm
just
good with that as well.
Yeah, so as you said, I had a couple of suggestions, one new objective, one revised objective. We had a little bit of back and forth with some good ideas via email, however, definitely not anything settled. So my only statement, I guess, for the record is that this is still a work in progress, and what our Chair Farris will discuss or present at the Board of Commissioners meeting next week will still be a work in progress. And if everybody here is comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with not having further discussion on my proposed goals here, but rather later this week and beyond. Okay.
Yeah, that is perfectly fine. So I would say if you guys for now want to review and finalize this work plan as it is now with the notion that it's a working plan and updates can be made as you guys discuss further. So that's all we would need at this point. So if you just want to make a motion to finalize the work plan as is, and then you guys can continue the discussion on making modifications.
Make a motion to finalize the work plan as it's work in progress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not quite comfortable with that. I would need one change to be able to go along with it, so let me just throw that out. I may still be in the minority, but currently I'm listed as the champion for Goal 4, and as written, I'm not comfortable being listed as the champion for Goal 4.
Okay. So then you could do a motion with modification of work plan to remove Rick Kraus as the champion of goal number 4.
Yep, then I'm fine.
And then you just make a motion as I just stated.
Okay, I will make a motion.
Yeah.
I'm getting the hang of it. I move that we remove my name as the champion for draft goal number 4 on the draft work plan.
Okay. Anybody
I can second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, nope, I appreciate the coordination and look forward to you guys meeting and kind of further vetting this.
Yep,
So
me too.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming to new business, view of the Olivia conditional rezoning. I invite Blair to present this item.
Good evening, everyone. I want to note that we have a very large audience with us tonight, larger than usual for planning board, so we appreciate y'all making the trip. So tonight I will just go through a basic presentation of staff review of the conditional rezoning. We also have Brady Finkley tonight to speak towards the TIA. I believe he has a presentation, and I believe the applicant has a presentation or two tonight. So we'll just start. Let's see. So anyway, okay. So an explanation of the request. This petition is requested by Tyson Carlton Mark, trustee, for a conditional rezoning map amendment for 4 parcels. You can see them there in the map in gold. And I just want to point out in particular the third one, ending with E. That is a partial rezoning. There is a creek that you don't see in this graphic, but you will see it later. There's a creek that divides that parcel, and in the plan you will see that they are not wanting to rezone that portion of the parcel. So that would just be a partial rezoning and that would be the largest parcel. And then the parcel at the top that ends with B, that is currently in Union County, and that's going to be up for annexation. Anyway, so that gives you a little bit of background. But as far as the overall land, it's basically 33.34 acres. A little more than 1/10 of that will be dedicated to commercial area, which would have about 20,000 square feet of commercial space. That's what's planned. And then the remaining portion of the land would be for a multifamily area, and it would feature no more than 307 dwelling units. You can see it there in that plan, situated on future Parkway East, and we'll show you more about the context. And I keep hitting the wrong button. So here you can see where it sits in town. The map on the left shows downtown Waxhaw, and then a gold frame that shows the blow up here. You can see going up 16, you can see the dashed line for the Parkway plan. That's just a vision plan. It's not exact, but Parkway East already does exist to some degree. You can see it there in the larger map, and about 0.3 miles down that partially paved road is the beginning of the project. You can see it there on Waxhaw Parkway East, like I said. And then you see on the north side, the Union County with the parcel that's in there. To the west is a residential community, Providence Farms, and on the east is undeveloped land. And the red development to the south, it's red because it's under construction, that's Blythe Mill Apartments. So here is the current zoning. And you can see the property outlined in kind of the gold. You see it there on Parkway East with the gold star. And again, you see the portion that's in Union County. You can see the Providence Farms development that's on the west as R1. And to the south, it's also, well, to the east and the south of it is all employment center zoning. And of course, the property itself is employment center zoning currently. I also want to point out that the red there, as you can see, is corridor commercial, and it actually goes down the parkway. It actually touches the property. So there is a common, the properties meet. In other words, this property is adjacent to CC zoning. So in the future land use plan, what was envisioned in this plan that was adopted less than 2 years ago, actually, seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't. You can see that that property was envisioned to remain employment center and the property around it. Because the idea for employment center, as is written out here under principal uses, you can make out very quickly that it's intended for high-tech manufacturing or light industrial or warehousing or businesses, any businesses basically that employ. That was the overall goal for employment center. But of course, there's of course opportunity to have conditional zoning like we're seeing tonight.
When you have an EC, you can put retail on in an EC.
Yes, in the land development code, there's of course the entire table of uses, and it would not be appropriate for all types of retail, but there is some. So we can delve into that, but I would have to consult the table of uses to be able to show you exactly what it will allow. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into their rezoning plan.
Okay.
I just want to point out that, here you can see like the brown area below, that's that Blythe Mill Apartments that was slated for mixed use. And then, of course, the lands to the north and west of it are more low density and rural.
One other quick question.
Yes.
Employment center. Thank you. Is any residential allowed in employment center?
It can be done through conditional zoning, and that's what this conditional zoning is partly about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, employment center, a CZ employment center, conditional zoning where it's still employment center, that is the way that you can get apartments into employment center.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks.
But yeah, it has to be run through the conditional zoning process. So tonight we are looking at a conditional zoning, and the proposed zoning for these 4 parcels, or most of these 4 parcels, is conditional zoning mixed use. This particular category, while it hasn't really been used in Waxhaw, it is devoted to this kind of situation where it's an overall land area of greater than 25 acres. And of course, tonight we're looking at a over 33-acre total land area. So it meets that criteria. Ideally, or actually per code for the CZMU, the residential to non-residential mix is important. But it's a broad range. It can be for non-residential uses anywhere from 20% to 60% is what the intention is for this zone, this zoning district. But this can be adjusted if a project is found to provide a significant economic benefit to the town as determined by the zoning administrator. I want to point out, if you read the fine print, what the district description is all about. I'll just read it to you. The CZMU allows for flexibility in layout and design of larger parcels that are of significant public interest due to either location or economic benefit, environmental reasons, or cultural characteristics. And it also allows for all uses of other districts. So it gives the developer a great deal of flexibility as to what they can put in there. If they had gone with employment center, CZ, it still would have limited what they could put in what their commercial area is. And there may be other reasons why they also have decided to rezone to this district. I'll let them explain that. But this gives you the general idea of what this zone is about.
You put kind of like a ratio or this percentage in there of 20% non-residential use, that would apply to the 20,000 square foot commercial space.
Correct.
In the context of the toll project, where there's 307 apartments. So I'm interested in the math of how do you equate the 20,000 square foot commercial space with residential rooftops?
I think the way that it's computed is just land area that is devoted to that particular district. There may be some fine lines there that legal would need to get involved in if there was some splitting of hairs, but in general, it's just what area of the land is devoted to one versus the other.
Not all that scientific.
We try not to be, but sometimes you have to get down to the.
I guess I was looking for more science. It would be more interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it would be by square footage of the buildings. But if we do get into those questions, I will need to consult legal for that. But just generally, the way it's written in zoning is, that 20 to 60% non-residential, or in other words, in this case, particularly commercial.
But and I guess it begs the question then, where are we in that range of percentages?
I'm going to show you that next.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, actually, we already have seen that a little over a tenth of the land area is devoted to the commercial. But here I can show it to you graphically. Here you see the site. It's turned on its side, so north is to the right. And so you can see Parkway East would be on the left there to the south of the project. And so up against Parkway East is that commercial area. And you can see a dashed line behind there's like two buildings and then some parking layout. And then you see the dividing line between the commercial area and the residential. So that comes to just a fraction more than 10% of the property. So we'll get into the conditions and how they want to approach that. But just for right now, I just want to show you a general description of the property. This is just sort of a boiled down general features of the property that I want to point out. And the applicant, well, I'm sure we'll get into more detail about what's planned. But what you can see here is, I've got a line on the top just basically showing where's the commercial, where's the residential, along with the common open space that's devoted in this property. But I also want to point out there, along the top, or in this case the west, between the project and the R1 residential area that's built out, large lot homes. There is a 40-foot undisturbed buffer there, so those trees are not disturbed by grading. They exist now, and they will continue to exist and be protected through the construction of this project and beyond. On the Parkway side, that's actually a 50-foot buffer between the commercial and the residential. So these are just according to our buffer rules that are in the LDC. On the east side of the project, at the bottom, you can see there's a 30-foot stream buffer for that existing creek there. So it's going to be 30 foot on this side, 30 foot on the other side. You can also see on the I'll get into some of the detail now that's more about the circulation. You can see Parkway East, and the way they have it drawn is that it is extended to what is called Public Road A for right now. That shows that main spine that connects to both the commercial and the residential area, and it ends in that cul-de-sac. What's planned there, or at least what at least is in the conditions, is that there would be a future road connection as required by the Land Development Code from that cul-de-sac to the next property, which would be to the east. So that's why it says future road connection there with the big yellow arrow. The smaller, longer arrow is the future trail connection. That is one of the conditions that the LDC imposes, or at least it's a way of approaching the general Land Development Code requirements for connectivity, because that is applied to both vehicular and pedestrian. So in this case, because that creek is there, what we did was determine that we could satisfy the Land Development Code requirements for pedestrian connectivity by having a creek crossing there, a pedestrian creek crossing.
I was going to say, while we're talking about that little connection for the road, this is for a zoning change tonight to hear about it. But the property to the bottom of the page, or would be to the east of this property, would still be zoned EC.
Yeah, this rezoning does not affect that.
Industrial equipment, trucks, all that, I guess, adjoining or being adjacent to residential, I guess trucks aren't going to be using a roundabout, but there's more heavy traffic with the EC or different traffic. I'm not going to say heavy, it's going to be different.
Non-residential.
For that traffic continuity, how does that work with a residential area with all those apartments there?
Well, those are good concerns. I mean, frankly, from the history of employment center zoning district and how it's been developed so far in the town, you're not seeing a lot of industrial coming in. I think the town would benefit greatly if there were some light industrial that did come into the town that the EC is particularly, appropriate for.
Yeah.
But employment center is, you might jump to the far end of the scale of, saying, oh, it's going to be industrial, but there's a whole range of uses that are allowable within the employment center that's about employment.
Yeah, I would.
So, it's a potential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a potential, but first of all, there is the buffer of the stream, 60 feet altogether of what has to be maintained around that stream. So that provides that eastern buffer, and it goes all the way up to the north end.
Right.
Yes, there would be a road connection. And maybe the applicant will speak to what they envision would happen to the east of this property, but I'll leave that to them. But yeah, I mean that's why I go through what the current zoning is. But go ahead.
Even if there is the buffer, to John's point, once from the future employment zoning, even if I'm coming into the cul-de-sac and I'm going out from the public road A, and that will be this heavy traffic that will impact the residential, correct?
Well, I want to clear up what might be a misconception just from, you're just looking at this plan, so you're seeing public road A, and perhaps imagining that the adjacent property would also have to use that road, but the development of that adjacent property would also have its own requirements for circulation. So they would, and certainly if it's something that's heavier traffic, they're going to want to get directly onto Parkway East. They're not going to want to cut through a development like that. I would imagine, but just remember that there will be more circulation with subsequent development. So, but yeah, I understand, and maybe the applicant will speak to that. Just a couple other things to point out. Where they show the Parkway East extension, that is, you'll see that there's a 300 feet arrow there, and what that goes to is the current property line. I mentioned that the applicant did not want to rezone all of that particular large parcel, but that is one of that hatched area to the south is currently one of their parcels. I'll let them speak to their plans for that portion of the parcel.
Is that different topography there?
Well, it's on the other side of the creek. So I can say that right away.
Yeah, I guess it's not.
So it's just not part of this development plan, and but it'd be better for them to speak to what their plans are for that. So anyway, one other thing I want to point out, as far as the circulation goes, you can see Public Road A is the main spine for this project by which someone can access the commercial area and the residential area. You'll see that I'm going to use the little red light here. You can see that there's that entrance. You can also see another entrance into the residential, and then a third entrance that would go into the residential. One thing that doesn't show up on this graphic, I wasn't able to update it in time, but what this says about future trail connection, that is most likely going to come from this crossing. There would be a road crossing here, a pedestrian crossing, and then it would go down to the creek, probably more from that area. because that is so dependent on natural conditions, grading particularly, that's something that's usually worked out more at the construction document phase. But the important thing for a conditional zoning is that it is shown on the conditional zone that there will be that future trail connection, and that part of it will be built. The part that at least goes to the 30-foot stream buffer. We'll get into those conditions in upcoming slides. But I just want to point out that, again, here's the pedestrian connection all the way to path 24, and that's in the adopted pedestrian plan. So that's, because it's in an adopted plan, is incumbent upon the developer to construct that path to Waxhaw standards. And so Parks and Recreation would be involved in that, making sure that the trail was something that they could take over once it's done, because it would become, public.
At the risk of getting in the weeds, if that creek is on the property, so any type of bridge for a pedestrian walkway, it's expectations of the developer to build that forward.
Well, in
for
this
the trail?
it's a good question. In this situation, we have two connections across the creek that the town is insisting that go in as part of our, to meet our land development code. One is the connection by road,
Sure.
and one is that creek crossing. What we would do generally, and there's other staff here that can correct me on this, but my understanding is that that road would need to be built to a practical point but they wouldn't have to build half a bridge. You would build it, you would have the easement, you would build it as far as you could, and then it's incumbent actually on the future development, in this case the development to the east at the bottom, they would have to make that connection. Generally, we would want the street, the paved street, to go all the way to the property line, but when it does involve a creek, there has to be an arrangement worked out for that. So
I just ask because I know bridges are expensive. I ask because bridges are expensive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and the same is true to a lesser degree with the future trail connection, that in this case we're saying build a trail down to the 30-foot buffer. And that location, even though we have some general parameters of where it would be, somewhere in here, it would be determined at the construction document level as to where exactly that should be. And then again, it's incumbent upon the other property owner or the next developer, basically, to complete that connection. And I want to point out that I don't know exactly how big this creek is, but it's probably, it may be a situation where it's a culvert rather than a bridge.
Sure.
So I just want to remind everybody of that.
Just on that topic, is there any precedent for having the current developer who isn't being expected to build a bridge or half a bridge to provide fee in lieu of that construction, so that the cost to the next developer, which I know in this case happens to be owned by the same group, but if it weren't, could be shared or defrayed?
Is there a precedent for that? I would like to defer to staff. If anybody has an example, can you think of anything?
No, not as far as a fee in lieu to where one developer pays another developer. A lot of time we see when developments, again, this is just at a certain scenario, if they're coming online around the same time, we would ask them to coordinate. But as Blair was alluding to, looking at a construction document phase, we would ensure that the connection is feasible, because we don't want a project to build something at their grade, but then on the other side it's 50 feet above. So we look at that more in depthly to ensure that that connection can be adequately made. But we don't have a precedent to where we would require a developer to pay another developer for their side of a development. It's pretty much first come, first serve. The same with TIA improvements. Two developments may come online at around the same time. Their mitigation requirements are the same. Developer A comes in first, and they want their COs, so they will do the improvement first. But we often ask for coordination to where they can do the mitigation at the same time. but sometimes it doesn't work out if a development is 2 or 3 years ahead of another development. We do our best to coordinate to where it's simple rather than developer A putting in said requirements and then developer B comes along and then has to rip out those requirements and to do something else. We work well with James and Kimberly Horn to kind of make sure that they do it in unison to the best of their ability.
Yeah, I understand. I would just say, in this particular case, it's not first come, first served. It's sort of last come, first served in that the requirement falls completely on the second, the future developer to cross over the property line, cross over the stream. So maybe you lose a little bit of negotiating leverage, with the first developer, and you create a little bit of a barrier, a little less trade space with the second developer. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mattison. Okay, so one last thing I want to show you on this graphic is, as I was getting to, there's Public Road A, I was describing that. There's also another road that gives another access to the commercial area and the residential area. This is partly for fire to do the best to meet fire code for this. They're supposed to have 2 different access points, preferably on either side, of course, but in this case, that was the best that could be worked out. But this is important circulation for other reasons for the commercial and residential. But anyway, they show it as a gated access that would be set up so that emergency vehicles could open it. But anyway, I just want to impress that graphic on your mind because the next slide will just summarize that in written form with staff summary of this development proposal. So again, some of this will be already familiar, but as far as the capacity goes, in summary, it'd be up to 307 multifamily dwelling units and no more than 20,000 square feet of commercial space. Some of this is what the applicant has asked for. Some of this is something that more the town is for, but this is the summary of conditions as is. And again, that land use ratio, commercial portion may be less than, well, in this case, the applicant is asking or wanting to, or saying that or describing the plan that the commercial portion may be less than the required non-residential mix for CZMU zoning district. Again, that the LDC says 20 to 60. In this case, it's roughly 10-90. Or I'm sorry, 10% rather than up to 20%. Roads, there's the construction of TIA improvements. That includes the Parkway East segment. They show it going to Public Road A, which is a 900-foot extension of the existing. And then also what we just talked about, the street stub from Public Road A, that cul-de-sac to the adjacent property. And then also that gated secondary access road to residential. Again, I want to emphasize that this is what the applicant is putting forward in this particular development scenario. The pedestrian facilities, the trail easements extended to the property line, trails constructed to connect to and include Path 24. Again, that was at the north end. That's part of the pedestrian plan. And the one that goes down to the stream, more in the mid part of the development, it goes to the 30-foot stream buffer. The easements would continue all the way to the property line, but the actual construction would be as described. The buffers, as you saw on that graphic, there's the required 40-foot wide undisturbed perimeter buffer along the western boundary between the development and that large lot residential area. And then it widens to a 50-foot buffer between the commercial and that residential area. And then, of course, there's the 30-foot required stream buffer. And then as far as open space and the amenity areas, there's some detail about that the applicant can provide in their presentation. But I just want to sum up by saying there's a required 3.33 acres. That's the minimum, at least, that's required. And that's publicly accessible recreation space. That means 10% of the site. As far as the parking goes, according to the Land Development Code, they can request up to a 20% reduction in the required parking, just as it's laid out in the table, the required parking for whatever uses. They've chosen to do a 15% reduction, so that's well within the 20%. And the way they've done it is, their one-bedroom units require 1.5 spaces, two-bedroom, 1.75, three-bedroom, 2 spaces. So that's how they have their parking counts calculated. Now, I just want to remind you that a conditional rezoning is site-specific design, and any major design changes requires a revised submittal and review proceeding. So now we get to the planning staff recommendation. Naturally, the town and the applicant are trying to come together to an agreement with conditional zoning. And so staff provides assistance in that by saying, okay, this is where they've met the code. This is where we think they have not met the code, or something that they would need to do to satisfy the intent of the code. And so what you're going to see here, what I'm going to read to you is basically that. The staff recommends approval of the proposed conditional rezoning from EC to CZMU contingent upon the extension of Parkway East to the existing property line, which would be not the 900 feet, but they would be the 1,200 feet that goes to the property line that was shown on the plan and that was part of the original TIA scoping document. And I'll allow our TIA experts to elaborate on that. But that does include a stream crossing, the stream that we've been talking about, whether it's a bridge or whether it's a culvert. The estimate is that, well, the width of that would be about 70 linear feet, basically. And so that's the stream mitigation. That's an important number when calculating what the stream mitigation would cost. But anyway, that's one of the factors. That's one of the contingent clauses. The next is the construction of the 180-foot segment of Path 24. That's really just underscoring what the code already explicitly requires. If the pedestrian plan shows that path, the developer has to build it. And then of course there would be a pedestrian connection to the proposed project so that the public could access it along the sidewalk system. And a third is the removal of the gate at the second road connection to the residential units. That road connection ultimately provides a connection for those residents to reach Waxhaw Parkway East, but it also provides a way for them to access the commercial area, benefiting the connectivity of the site and connectivity overall for Waxhaw, which, this development, because it's such a long string, it's hard to make it because of the constraints, really, along the west, east, and north. The south is really the only opportunity at present to provide connectivity. So we insisted that it started with, of course, with fire code, but there's the necessity for those two roads. And we feel that necessity extends not just to the commercial, but to the residential as well. In fact, it's even more important for fire that they are able to reach the residential. Granted, there is a gate there that can be accessed by emergency vehicles, but just for the sake of connectivity in general for the residents and for the benefit of the commercial area, the fact that they could get there through that road is important to the town. Another reason for the staff recommendation is that there is additional commercial space here. We don't see that every day in Waxhaw. So this would be 20,000 square feet, and that would favor the town's property tax balance. I've added this statement here. I think it's something that everybody's already aware of, that the views of Olivia serves as the first phase of a multi-phase Olivia development that would continue Parkway East, that's critical, all the way to Waxhaw Indian Trail. So that large area that I showed you that was all employment center, that's basically the area we're talking about, that I'm talking about. I'll leave it to the applicant to expound on that if they wish. And so this larger vision featured a mix of uses including additional retail, commercial, office, civic institutional space, no light industrial, that wasn't really in the mix, and then recreational amenities. So that's what we understand the case to be. But those are the staff recommendations with the contingencies. a reasonableness and consistency statement. The staff can suggest that. It's up to ultimately the Board of Commissioners to decide upon that, but I want to read it to you, what we have. The request is consistent with stated goals of the Waxhaw 2040 Comprehensive Plan by furthering the construction of the Waxhaw East Parkway and Path 24 of the Waxhaw Pedestrian Plan, and by including non-residential land uses for greater balance to the tax base. So that's the statement that talks about how it's consistent with the Waxhaw 24 comp plan and its stated goals. The request is reasonable and in the public interest as it meets the requirements of the Waxhaw Land Development Code for the Conditional Zoning Mixed Use District, the CZMU, which is intended to provide flexibility in design for properties of significant public interest, and I say here, due to location, particularly the Waxhaw Parkway location. So the requested action tonight for the Planning Board is either a motion to recommend the conditional rezoning CD 006, 2024. That shows you how long ago this project got started. For views of Olivia as presented, or a motion to recommend with modifications, or a motion to deny the recommendation of the conditional rezoning CD 006 2024 for views at Olivia. So that's what I have for my presentation. You can see this last visual is looking from Providence Road down existing Parkway East. As we all know, it kind of just goes down there and just kind of stops, and we want to see it continue. So that's a big part of what this project can bring forth. On the issues of transportation and all, again, Brady Finkley is here to present about the TIA. If you want to go ahead, or if the applicant would rather go ahead first, I think that's up to y'all. Okay, Brady.
Thank you, Blair. Good evening. Good to see y'all. Brady Finkley, Kimley Horn. So I'm here tonight to present on the TIA that we performed on behalf of the town of Waxhaw for the site. I'll go through basically a high-level overview of the TIA to hit some major bullet points there. But my goal here tonight is to make sure that I answer any questions that y'all have, to make sure that you have your questions answered to be able to make your decision, your recommendation. So feel free to stop me or ask questions at the end. Okay, so I'd like to start off, most of y'all have seen this slide before, but I'd like to start this off by sort of establishing what a TIA is and what it is not. So the purpose of a development TIA is to evaluate and identify the incremental impacts caused by a site on the surrounding transportation system, and then to identify the mitigation improvements to offset that delta impacts. And it's consistent with the town and NCDOT mitigation requirements. So the point there being is we know traffic, Waxhaw is especially on 16 is bad. This is not you can't require development to fix all the existing problems, but instead to offset their impacts. All right, so generally speaking, high level for this TIA, the development level did meet for both town of Waxhaw and NCDOT thresholds for a TIA. Both the analysis and mitigation was based off of town and NCDOT requirements. So you can see there the town's TIA policy, NCDOT's policy, and their TIA guidelines. We had the town of Waxhaw, NCDOT, the applicant, and ourselves there for both the TIA scoping and going through a review. And I will say that it's been submitted to NCDOT for a couple of months now. We are expecting their allotted time period to be up right about, I think today is what I had down. So we should be receiving their final review comments any time now. We have not received those yet. All right, so big picture about to boil it down what a TIA is. It's really, we're looking at four major steps. So basically we start out with existing conditions. We go out there and we collect data at the existing study intersections. We then take that data, being the counts and the overall intersection geometry. We take the counts, we grow them up to a future horizon year, which we call the build-out year. In this case, it'll specify as 2028. So we grew the volumes up to 2028 to more or less reflect what would be anticipated based on what we know now of 28 conditions without the site. And that's number 2, our background, or non-project conditions. We then take that, we apply the site traffic on top of it, and then we determine the delta, and then we compare that to NCDOT and the town of Waxhaw requirements to identify mitigation. All right, so existing study intersections, you can see here, they're basically along 16 from downtown at 60 and 75, north up through Alma Boulevard, based on the town of Waxhaw's TIA policy. We are required to evaluate all signalized intersections within a mile of the site, and then all unsignalized intersections, major unsignalized intersections at the discretion of the town and NCDOT. So you can see there, we have those 5 along NC 16 as well as the site access. We did collect counts when school was in session last spring. So both April is a combination of April and May counts. Based off the town's policy, we collect 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and then in the afternoon we collect 4:30 to 7, and then we identify the 1-hour peak within those time periods, and that's what our TI, our analysis is based off of. All right, so background conditions. So this is when we grow it up to 2028, we sort of look at it 2 different buckets. One is we call it non-specific growth, where it's really general growth that you project is going to continue to happen outside of the other specific developments we'll talk about in a second. That could be traffic from the south that we don't really know about, but really growing that traffic up as we know it's going to continue to grow, whether or not we have other developments happen locally around here. So you have that one bucket, and that was 2% per year. And then you add on top of that 7 other approved developments within the area. So we took the specific traffic from those 7 approved developments and added those on top. And when you combine those together, it comes out to about 9% per year. And that was taken right at the intersection of Waxhaw Parkway and 16. So here are those 7 approved developments within the area. You'll probably know them well, but you've got Old Town Village, Blythe Mill Townhomes, Seven Hills, Rogers Pond, the Preserve at Forest Creek, Emerson Park, and Yarborough Farm. Now, a reminder, a TIA is based off a snapshot in time. So these were the developments that we knew to be moving forward at the time that we scoped the project back then. So, and at that time, when we collected counts, which was last April and May, none of these developments have started. I think some of them have started now. But we basically predicted 100% of those developments on top of those 2024 counts. All right, so then we look at other TIP projects, which are Transportation Improvement Program. That's NCDOT's main funding mechanism for transportation projects. And one of them is coming here that was awarded through the town's successful pursuit of a grant. And that's HL0115. That is the Broome Street widening improvements, widening Broome Street from downtown at 16 and 75 up through Church Street, as well as including an eastbound left turn lane. That is when you're on 75 coming from South Carolina side to turn left to go north on 16. It includes that eastbound left. Construction is currently scheduled for 2028. I mentioned earlier that our future horizon year build out for this project was 2028. Those coincided, so we assumed that this project was in place. That's going to be key for later on when we come to mitigation. We assumed the eastbound left turn lane was in place already. We assumed the improvements or the widening was going to be in place along Broome Street, which is huge. The other one is, so I'm sure you're familiar with, is the NC 16 widening, U5769. That one, unfortunately, is not planned to be constructed by 2028, but it is currently planned for 2029 to 2033. And so with that being beyond the 2028 time year, the town's TA policy does require us to look at a Bill plus 5 to capture projects like that so we can see what the network would look like with those improvements in place. And so we did run an analysis period that included the 16 widening in place as well, which does, by the way, include signals, new signals at Alma Boulevard and at Waxhaw Parkway when that project comes in. So that's another key thing to remember as we get into mitigation. All right, so now we're going to talk about the site specifically. A lot of numbers here. We have a laser. Yeah, perfect. All right, I'm going to train your eye really on these bold numbers. It's the 287 and 288. Those are, when you add everything together, You take your internal capture trip reduction, which is essentially great from a traffic standpoint, because it's think about, you have medical office buildings. Some of those employees may go over to the bar after work or something. They're not going to drive, and so they have some internal capture there, as well as your residential as well. They may use the fast casual restaurant, and so it provides an allocation for trips that are not specifically coming in and out of the driveway to every single trip's not coming to one of those. But once you take those into account, we end up with 287 AM peak hour trips and 288 PM peak hour trips. So to give you a relative basis, the town's TIA threshold for requiring a study is 100 peak hour trips or more. Okay. All right, and then we run all analysis, do a little fun stuff.
Could you go back one slide?
Sure.
Just give me another 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
So what I was looking for, I just saw it as you were clicking away. So about half of those trips are associated with the retail, and you're just making some assumptions about what kind of retail might be in the 20,000 square feet, and about half are due to people living there. Am I reading that right?
Pretty close. I'd say a little bit less than half would be if you if you split just residential and commercial.
Yeah.
Somebody does some quick math.
maybe
127
like a
divided by
third.
287. Yeah.
Yeah, a third is just from people living there, and 2/3 are from the retail. That's, I don't know, surprising to me, counterintuitive to me.
That's correct, and you can see the big one there. So again, we have to go off of the Institute of Transportation Engineer, ITE, land use codes that we had provided. It's a huge book, has a lot of samples. I think they had provided a juice smoothie type shop, which kind of fell in more in line with that coffee donut shop without a drive-through window. So you can see that's where the majority of your AM trips came from.
But it's so dependent. I mean, you just look at those numbers, and it's like if you hadn't put a donut shop in there or something like it, you'd have almost no trips for residential. I mean, there could be 2 donut shops in there. Okay.
That's right.
So I'm understanding.
Yep, no, good point.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the trip, Jen, before I move off?
No.
John was studying. You good?
Oh, no, I was looking at
All
it.
right.
No, you're good.
Okay. All right, so we run all analysis, and we ended up with 3 of the intersections where we identified mitigation at. So you can see them highlighted there. You'll see, so down at the south at NC 16 and 75, it's our favorite intersection. You have Waxhaw Parkway and NC 16, and of course, the site access, which includes the extension of the Waxhaw Parkway. So maybe I'll start there. So there, we, I think, Trey, you might have been one of the ones that I mentioned it. Someone had mentioned it before when we looked at a study on Waxhaw Parkway, but making sure that we think about not just right now, but eventually that Waxhaw Parkway is going to extend to the east. So if we looked at it isolated right now, there's no conflicting traffic if you're to turn left into the site, none today, which wouldn't warrant a turn lane. But we know in the future, once you extend it, you're going to have conflicting traffic. And so we wanted to look at the site with the future traffic along Waxhaw Parkway, make sure we're planning for a turn lane, and it did warrant a turn lane. So we're showing a left turn lane into the site there. The extension of Waxhaw Parkway to the east, to the eastern side of the site, that would include a cross section of reserving 120 feet of right-of-way. So that's for the future planned 4-lane divided Waxhaw Parkway that's currently within the adopted transportation plans. But in the short term, constructing the 3-lane section of that. So having like 12-foot lanes, 3-lane section, I believe it was a ditch section, with a multi-use path and planting strip along that section. So really that left turn lane will more or less just be some paint in the middle, right? So it'd be painting left turn lane. So then if you move over to the west at Waxhaw Parkway and 16, so that one's interesting because we know a signal has been approved by NCDOT there for the future TIP project. However, because that keeps being put off, the reality is with Waxhaw Parkways, with it not extending east to Waxhaw Indian Trail right now, if you put if you open that development up today, all of that traffic, almost all of it, if not all of it, would have to come out and access 16 at a stop-controlled intersection today. That doesn't have a whole lot of traffic, but it's already bad, right? And it'll be really, really unsafe. And so it did warrant a signal in both peak hours under build-out, and clearly showed the need for a traffic signal. So I say that with a caveat because that is up to NCDOT, but they've already approved a location for a signal there. And to me, it would be really unsafe not to have a signal there and allow an extra 300 trips to be accessing that intersection. And then as you move, and then one more thing on that, who knows timing? There's some things to think about. So let's say in the future this development opens where the TIP project hasn't come in place yet, so no signal there yet. But the Waxhaw Indian Trail, the Waxhaw Parkway has extended the Waxhaw Indian Trail. I think additional analysis would have to be done there to see what kind of relief that would go. We didn't study that, so that's a thing that would need to be studied if that were a scenario that played out. And then moving down south at 16 and 75. So again, we had already assumed that the eastbound left turn lane was in place because of the TIP project, and there's just a lot of demand on the intersection, as you know. Not a whole lot of really acceptable ways to improve capacity there. Really, we know the fix there is to remove cars from there because you have all of the constraints with the railroads, the historic impacts, the buildings, on-street parking. You have a downtown environment where people are crossing, so the more lanes you add means more pedestrian exposure, railroad tracks, a lot of stuff down there that limits your ability to really increase the capacity down there with making really significant improvements. So what we've identified there, which is consistent with the Emerson Park development, would be to provide a payment in lieu at that intersection based off of their impact at that intersection. That would go towards either intersection improvements there or to a future way to relieve traffic from there, i.e. a Waxhaw Parkway extension.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Do you have a sense, you just mentioned that this development would add, let's say, 350 trips in the morning and the afternoon. What is the baseline today? Do you just have a ballpark, like through intersection 4?
Yeah, for what's coming out of Waxhaw Parkway now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so today it's, let's say in the ballpark of AM is 30, and the PM it's 45-ish.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So significant increase in traffic there. That's way too small for y'all to see, so I just went over all that. And then really, I'll stop here because I've got more detailed mitigation to get in there if you're interested, but I'll stop there and just, happy to stop and answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Open for questions on the traffic.
You can go back to the map. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty thorough. Yeah. It answered a couple questions that I had. So
Good.
No, I'm comfortable with your methodology there. So
Happy to answer questions if they come to mind as we're talking through it.
Just a note, not specific to this, but for future reference, I might have missed it, but I don't think this TIA report was in the packet for the meeting. I personally would have liked to have been able to review it beforehand. If that's something that we can do going forward, that'd be great.
Yeah, understood. We're going to do that from now on.
Thank you.
Brady's an old pro at this. He anticipates a lot of our questions.
I would love for you to read through the report. Yeah, it'd be
I
fun.
have a question.
We can get together.
So we are looking at number 6, which is going towards the Olivier's site right now, right? But have you also thought about or anticipated anything that we've been talking about, the future EC, which is per Blair's presentation, it is going to stay as EC. And that from the map that I saw in Blair's presentation, that Waxhaw Parkway is still continuing into that EC zoned business area. So have we anticipated that traffic into this analysis already?
No, not in this analysis. There was discussion last year when we were looking at, they could probably get into more of it, but looking at more of a holistic look at a lot of this undeveloped land. But that sort of broke apart, and we were asked to look at this site alone.
Sorry,
But that-
just
go ahead,
one more,
go ahead.
because once, assuming that this is all correct and good for this particular site in discussion, and once that comes in, that layer will add up to this,
That's
correct?
right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
we'll get to go through that with that site, which I believe was probably a lot larger in this one too. So anything in the future would then get added to, assuming this got approved to this site. We would look at that together.
So with this site taking traffic into 16, the light at 4, of course, it's necessary, but the road itself is another situation. Is there lane widening for multiple turn lanes? Did you go over that and I missed it, or
A little
is
bit.
it-
So the current, and I think at the end of Blair's presentation, he had a great shot of what it looks like today, and I might even
Yeah.
have one in here. You sort of see it.
Because right
in the
now it's
upper
just a
right.
stop sign.
It's really a wide piece of pavement. It's like an airport runway almost, that with no striping on there. And so there would not at this time would not be any widening needed on the current section, but they would need to extend it over to their sites. Currently, it stops, I think, 900 feet or 1,200 feet short of their site, so they would have to extend that section along, and then I would think need to add paint on there because a left turn lane would be needed. So
But
no
then
widening needed.
But also at the light, there's no extra lanes that would have to be accommodated by moving over a sidewalk or, no?
No,
You're
no.
good.
The Blythe Mill Townhomes is actually required to restripe a left turn lane coming from Waxhaw Park, because they know Blythe Mill Townhomes, I believe, has the connection, another connection up to Waxhaw Parkway. So they're required to add, if it hasn't already been added, maybe it's already been added recently. Anyways, they're supposed to be adding a left turn lane with striping, but the pavement width is already there, so it's really just restriping.
Okay.
Add a left turn lane.
that's between 6 to 4, right, at the junction of
Well, actually, I was just talking about at the light.
the
Yeah,
proposed
just at
light?
4.
Yeah, the proposed light, right, at the 16 intersection.
Correct, yeah, that's where Blythe Mill
And
Townhomes is
you've got
required.
plenty of room there.
You have plenty of room,
Okay,
that's
all
right.
right, that was my question.
Okay, any other questions on traffic? Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like y'all have been listening to things on this petition for almost an hour, if not, so I apologize. Bridget Grant, land use consultant with Moore & Van Allen, pleased to be here on behalf of our very large team. We're representing Typar, which is a local landowner and developer that's going to be working on this site, and as you noted, also owns a large part of the rest of the site that's EC. So we're working with ESP, Visarc, Bradley & Ball Architecture, and Hagen Engineering. I might give a little bit of a choppy presentation because I don't want to repeat some of the things that Blair has already described or Brady has already described. So I'm going to kind of go through my slides and try not to duplicate anything that they have already said. So bear with me while I jump ahead a little bit. We spent a little bit of time at the front side talking about land use designation and the EC and why not using the full EC. EC does require conditional zoning for you to be able to do residential. And though some commercial uses are allowed, not necessarily, oddly, the types of commercial uses you would expect to support your employees in a future employment center, or like the nail salon that was mentioned, or the quick serve restaurant, those uses weren't actually allowed in the EC. So we switched to the MU though it still aligns with the purpose of the EC, just sort of as a technical tool to use to be able to allow the full range of uses. So this supports the infrastructure expansion by supporting the Waxhaw Parkway. Another really important thing, and Brady started to mention at the end, is that we have to build a section of the parkway to get up to our site. So it's not just us building our portion in front of our site, but we also have that leg to provide that connection to even get us to the site. This will facilitate that future commercial and employment center growth, and really does a good job of sort of providing some of the rooftops and beginning to, what we sometimes say in real estate, like unlock the rest of the story, unlock the rest of the site to support the future EC development. We're going to be adding up to 20,000 square feet of commercial space that helps support some of the residential that's there. And the employment center generally is intended to be looked at as a whole. And so while we're providing that smaller mix of retail and residential, when you look at the employment center as a whole, this is just the beginning, a smaller portion of a much larger piece. As Blair mentioned, he already walked you through the expansion or the extension of the parkway. There are some buffer pictures that are small that are in our actual rezoning package that gives you an idea of those undisturbed areas and how far we're staying away, from our edges and our neighbors. We've provided residential and commercial elevations to give you an idea of the overall quality of the site. We've really spent, you can see the size of our team. We have spent a lot of time paying attention to the details, the types of materials, change in windows, change in the roof lines, variation, and those architectural details that really connote the quality of the buildings to be constructed on the site. You can see that these are some of the commercial elevations. They don't align exactly with the residential, but they're intended to be complementary to and sort of fit the character of the overall development. These are some of the open spaces. I know it says elevations, but it's really the open spaces. We have a series of open spaces throughout the community, and so these are just a couple of vignettes just showing the amount of green space, our opportunities to provide trails, increase open spaces. I know one of the requests from staff would be that we constructed that segment of trail, and we agree we will be able to do that. We also provided some precedent imagery. As Blair mentioned, this is part of a story for a much larger district. This is part of a very large employment center. So these are some of the images that helped us come up with the overall plan and the idea of creating this residential community. It is a very narrow site. It sort of was interesting to look at how you could build the site, provide the roadway infrastructure. I like to sort of close by saying that there's a series of development standards that are in our petition. Those all are conditions. It's very precise. We are limited to the number of units, the maximum amount of square footage, our buffers, all of those details, parking spaces are all spelled out in great detail. And so the only way for us to ever make any of those changes are to come back for another rezoning if we wanted to do any of those tweaks. And so the only deviations that we were looking for from the ordinance was that 15% reduction in parking, which is more in line with the market reality for multifamily, as well as the deviation on the mix of uses, and we think that's important for where we're starting. I'm going to go back to the site plan. There were of the three things that staff has requested, the conditions. The one is the removal of the gate. I'm going to see. So we've proposed a gate right in this location. This isn't a road, it's actually a driveway. So the driveway was required by fire because they need an additional emergency access. Essentially, if you're looking at the site, it's less than 600 feet wide. It doesn't necessarily necessitate another public street to be constructed because the street along this edge of our property where we've got the roundabout provides sufficient traffic relief for all of the residents here to be able to get out. But what fire likes to have is one other driveway that in cases of emergency, there's another option. So we'd like to keep that gate in that location to provide some separation between the residential and commercial so the commercial users aren't cutting through the parking lot of the multifamily to get up to the roundabout. We look at it more as trying to allow it in case of emergency, but really because the site's so narrow, they don't necessarily, it's not like they have to drive very far out of their way to get to that public street. As I mentioned, we are amenable to building the trail, and the other thing that they're
Yeah,
asking.
Bridget,
Yes.
I'm good with what you said. I
Okay.
think that it's generally true. It's pretty skinny, so if they want to just go a few more parking spaces, they can make it over
Yeah,
the public
from
road.
here right to there.
My concern would be just in the minutia of what that intersection looks like at Public Road A to the Waxhaw Parkway. That's not going to be one car in and then one car out.
No,
That would have to be.
there's
like
plenty of queuing. I mean, that's also when staff looks at this, they want to make sure that there's enough stacking in this area that.
For
and if this-
right
yes,
turns and left turns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure James or Brady can correct if I misspeak, but this is my understanding. Yes, there should be plenty of room for stacking to allow free
But
movement.
that would be, Brady, that'd be one of those areas where you can turn left out of that driveway. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we actually evaluated it. Yeah. We actually evaluated it with just that one intersection because it's a sort of worst case scenario, and it would operate fine. So, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, thank you.
No, that's fine. The last thing I was going to touch on was that staff did request, and I'm sorry, I've got the laser up again, that we extend the road all the way across. As we mentioned, we only did the rezoning limits to the center line of the creek because it sort of makes sense to look at that other side of the creek as part of the other larger parcel and development that's going to occur. And again, we're the property owners of the other side as well. So we'd like to not build that extension because we are taking on some of the off-site by building that section of the parkway prior to getting to our site to provide that connection from 16 to fill in the gap. So we'd like to be able to stop at a place that makes sense when we get in before the creek so that we can carry the burden of the creek crossing with the larger development that's to come.
Just a point of information, this is James Kelly, Traffic and Transportation Engineer. So going back to the stacking point that Bridget was making, the term for that we look at from a traffic perspective is internal protected stem, and they do have adequate IPS or internal protected stem. We do have one concern from the Parkway perspective because we're looking at the existing property line as it exists with this plan, with this submitted plan, and that full extension would be 1,200 feet, and that's something that we looked at from the initial TIA scoping phase, and that was agreed to within the TIA scoping documents, and then we proceeded with the TIA, and it's identified as a required mitigation for the 1,200 feet. So considering that this is a conditional rezoning, the board can decide whatever the board wants to decide, but from a TIA perspective, it's a requirement for the full 1,200 feet.
Can I ask Brady, I don't believe that extending it or not extending it impacts mitigation in terms of level of service or changes.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's more of a. Yeah,
It
James
was an
could probably answer.
assumption.
It's probably more of a what was agreed upon initially versus from an engineering standpoint, looking at this site solely. Yeah, it would have to be built in the future by someone anyway, right? I think is the point. So it's either to continue to extend it, but to serve the property as it is, it would only need to extend at least to its driveway.
Understood.
I noticed
Yeah.
that on the public road that you're, I think, proposing parking on the public road. At least that's what I interpreted those little hatch marks to be. Is that right, first of all?
It is. I believe it's ordinance requirement as part of this cross-section, but James, on-street parking?
I believe so for that one particular issue, for that one particular area. Going back to the Parkway, Brady is correct. As far as from a level of service perspective, that is accurate. What is also accurate is, and important for you all to understand, as well as the board to understand, is that, again, there are executed documents in place that there was an agreement to have the full 1,200 feet at initial TIA scoping. Again, that's always conditioned per the board, since this is a conditional rezoning.
With regard to the parking, I don't have any idea what the normal best practices are. I saw the ratios that I guess are required by the code, and you're pretty much right at them, roughly 600 parking spots, I think, for the roughly 300 different residences, which could be 1, 2, or 3 bedroom. So we're assuming 600 cars for 300 units. It feels really tight, and so I just wonder what the if it turns out that parking is tough in there, what happens? And I'm guessing people will end up parking on Public Road A as the first fallback. But can you give me any better sense of like what where the benchmarks are? Is this really tight, or is this generous? I mean, you've got to.
It definitely meets market realities, and I would look at it like this: they have to be able to get funding and financing, so it's got to meet the requirements of the market.
Right.
Yet you have to have enough parking to be able to build the product.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say the other way is that it can be managed. If there are parking issues, they can institute parking passes with the assumption.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I know in some cases, the equivalent of an HOA can establish no more than 2 cars per household or things like that. I don't know whether that intersects with Town of Waxhaw policy or whether those can be conditions. But I do worry that there's no real capacity for overflow if it's not sufficient.
Yeah, and one thing from staff perspective too, because we like to see less parking overall, but when you have 2 varying uses, right? You have the multifamily, then you have the commercial. We have an option to where if it need be, there can be a shared parking agreement arranged to where the commercial businesses are probably operating at a different peak hour than maybe what the multifamily people leaving and going. So that could also be something arranged as well. Because if commercial businesses close by 7 or 8, well then there's probably residents who can then occupy that parking spaces as well. So there are things that we can work on to ensure that there's adequate parking without paving the entire world. Yeah, and true, as part of the development continues east, there could be other opportunities for shared parking or other parking amenities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that we don't know for sure. You're not ready to commit to what the properties further east will be. Right now, they're zoned economic centers, but you might come back for rezoning there. You might want to do more residential things. So I assume we can't know that just yet, right?
We're not ready just yet. I think there's a vision that we're looking at that's a wide range of residential employment as well as recreation uses, but we're not ready to look at that yet.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the only other slide I didn't show you was the thank you slide. So
I did have some others if no one else has.
I probably will have 1 or 2, but go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm the Path 24, that's Greenway, if I understand the plan correctly. So that's a 10-foot shared use path that's being built. Is that, I see yeses back there. And the pathway to Path 20, or the sidewalk or the pedestrian connection to Path 24, is that also going to be a 10-foot shared use path?
Did you figure out that? Do you know that detail?
Could be gravel, maybe, I don't know.
we've got large plans over here, so.
Yeah, we would
Yes.
see that in their plans, answer what their intention is.
And what goes
Nolan
around
is
the retention
confirming.
pond as well. Is that what
It's
you're
all 10
talking
feet.
about? All of that?
All of it is 10 feet.
Retention pond and those Path 24.
I'm assuming they're all the same, but
It's all 10 feet.
it's all 10 feet
Yes,
and it's
I
all
just
paved?
confirmed with our engineer. Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's good.
Go ahead.
Okay. One thing that hasn't come up at all, and I know that you had a neighborhood meeting. I don't know, I think it was late last year. But I don't see anything in the briefings about what community feedback has been, or what came out of that and what your responses were. Is that something that you're able to brief?
I was actually not present for the community meeting. Marcus or Catherine?
We- If Blair has it, then we can get it from him. I mean, that's cool, as long as he has it.
Don't have it tonight, I'm sorry. I don't have the findings
you-
from that.
we
But we
can
do
get it
have
from you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We went ahead and noted that and submitted all of our comments, everything that was submitted to us, we submitted that to staff. But Blair was probably before you were dealing with this 100%.
Well, the staff is not directly involved in those neighborhood meetings, but we do receive the minutes and we give the instruction of how the meetings are to be
That's the
held.
information you're looking for, right? The minutes of the meeting. and-
Yeah, the minutes of the meeting would be good, or
Yeah.
that and any, responses or
Feedback
positions, feedback,
points.
yeah.
Would you require that before you can make a recommendation?
That's my feeling, yeah. I would like to have that.
I would agree with Rick on that, yeah.
They were actually not as, they were pretty positive. We got a lot of really good feedback. Unfortunately, we had to,
It was in the parking lot at the elementary school, right? Yeah.
yeah, we couldn't get in,
Yeah.
the school.
You were fast on your feet, for sure. That was,
Oh, my
We had
goodness.
to improvise on that day, but it was a beautiful day out, so
Yeah.
it wasn't that bad. I'm looking back. I have no connection here. Do you have-
I know I was going to say it's very difficult to get a connection here to pull up a file. So
Yeah. Let's see if we can just, we can go down, if you guys want.
I can read some summary points from
Let's
the
just read some
Catherine.
of them.
If you got summary points, yeah,
We've got
that's
summary
wonderful.
points. I think
Well,
that
we could also take a quick 3 to 5 minute break to obtain that material for you to pull up on the slide,
okay.
right? Yes?
Are you good with that?
Yes, we can.
So just
take
call for a
quick
quick,
break.
okay, cool.
Agreed.
motion
Make a
to
motion to recess real quick.
I'll make a motion to recess for 5 minutes.
I can. All in favor?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you.
We are ready to reconvene.
When you are ready, make a motion to reconvene, and then we can get started with the remainder of the meeting.
I can make a motion to reconvene.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
So thankfully, we were able to pull up, and it's just a list of general questions. And so I think that based on the site's location, it wasn't necessarily that we had a lot of adjacent neighbors. Rather, we had people who were just broadly interested in the overall development of the entire employment center. So you can see from the questions listed above, there are questions about road projects, additional open space, price points on rental units, the types of things that you'd specifically want to know. If we've identified any of the commercial tenants, and generally at the phase of rezoning, we don't necessarily know exactly who the tenant mix is going to be, where traffic improvements will be made. And I think we've answered a lot of those questions for you here tonight. And then Blair, I don't know if you want to scroll down to the it's still just more questions about if we're clearing the site, sewer capacity, and all of those things come to how we will meet all ordinance requirements and local and state regulations. There's, of course, always comments about people who are concerned about losing the existing open space on the site. I think you can see that we've done our best to protect the buffers along the streams and add the amenity of the trails. And then in terms of answers, someone did mention that renters don't add to the tax base. It's a little bit, and I think you all have had someone from the county come and speak to you a few times. It's a little bit of an oddity that the commercial tax benefits of the multifamily is actually fairly high compared to some single family. So in the answers, we talked about the pond being sized to meet all state and local stormwater regulations, that there's enough capacity, but allocation is not issued, as you all know, until we're at the construction drawing phase. Areas will be required to be graded on the site. Other areas will remain undisturbed. At this point, the only plan for our pond is a walking trail, and I think we've pretty much walked through a lot of the answers with our presentation tonight. So it gives you an idea of the type of community engagement they had early on in the process.
Just a simple question. I have a dog. I saw you have a dog park laid out. Is that are all the open spaces here intended to be available to the broader public, or are they really intended as neighborhood amenities and not really encouraging public?
We have, as Blair mentioned, 10% of the site has to be publicly accessible open space, so about 3.3 acres is publicly accessible. I don't think any of our open spaces are necessarily fenced off unless there's specific amenities for the multifamily users.
Mm-hmm. And does the town of Waxhaw have any control over that as far as whether they're truly public amenities or just community amenities?
And would that bring extra cars to the spot?
Only if there's a place to park.
That was my point. Does that get factored into the TIA? Is the extra trips of the public coming there to use the amenities?
Yeah, so from the town perspective, I think Path 24 that will be constructed will be accessible to the public. Typically, we want publicly accessible amenities, and that could be just the general public of this development. So that's your open space as trails, paths, seating, dog park. And I think you guys will have an amenity center, which will be private to the residents of the development.
Sure.
So we use publicly accessible as a term, just being visibly and connected to public areas such as roadways, parks, greenways. So I imagine
I mean, to
be a
Rick's
mix.
point, I wouldn't expect the public to use the pool.
Right. Agreed.
But the dog park they would use the
They
heck
would
out of
use- yeah, they would.
dog park, which is kind of needed in the town, but
Oh,
then
we
you
hear
start-
that every day.
I know you do.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about the cars
I have a dog
to
on
get
my-
there.
From a liability, I have 2 dogs.
So anyway, that's something to think about.
from a liability perspective, the dog park would be something that was meant for the residents of the community. Again, just that's something even with your park and rec department would understand that.
No, but I'm disappointed. But
I know.
but I
have to.
But I appreciate the answer.
Thank you.
Try to keep the dogs out of there.
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. Could you?
Yeah,
repeat?
so once the trail is constructed, the Path 24 and the connection to the app, that will be publicly available and accessible. So that would be the biggest publicly recreation area for this development.
Yeah.
One question that a couple of us had was when you talk about a zoning change, the original zoning is EC, the commercial square foot as a by right. Can we put a actual number to that by right square footage? What that would have been in an EC original zoning? Or does it depend on the use? It
would depend on the use, because you could maximize a site for employment center for industry or business park in a different, because it'd be in a different layout and a different parameter than what multifamily would be. The parking would need to be different. I mean, it would be site specific on what would be allowed, because our employment center is very gracious with allowing square footages because we want in the future big industry, we want business parks, we want employment to remain local. So that's really a difficult question to answer without having more specific detail about the parameters of it.
And then in the similar topic, commercial, has the developer anticipated what is the commercial use or what type of commercial they will be having in this proposed development?
I apologize. I missed the first
Oh,
part
no
of your
worries,
question.
no worries. Any idea of any anticipated commercial use, what you're thinking of in this development?
So as Brady indicated in the trip gen table, that is our best guess at the type of uses. And we try to be a little aggressive to make sure that we've captured enough retail to align with the trips. And so I think we had in there some food-based, restaurant-based, some retail, and potential for office. So it was a wide range, but not tenant-specific.
Okay.
The range is as wide as possible with using the CCMU, because it's any use that's allowable in any district can be done there. So that was their reason for going from ECCZ, Employment Center CC, to CZMU, because they had a much broader range of uses. So consider the corridor commercial, those types of retail. That's much broader than what Employment Center would provide as in its table of uses, or the table of uses for it.
On that point, Blair, what would have been, would this level of density of residential development been allowed on a conditional zoning EC?
Well, the nature of conditional zoning is that you could, the applicant can ask for as much as they like. That's just the way conditional zoning works, and it's up to the town to decide, okay, or it's up to both parties to decide what is mutually acceptable and beneficial.
Right.
So in this case, also being conditionally zoned, zoning change request, you could conceivably limit the type of tenant for retail.
Well, the zoning itself doesn't. I mean,
We could as a condition.
As a condition, like if we said, we just don't want a gas station in that spot because it gum up the traffic in a certain way, we could, as a board, limit those.
yes, those could be listed as conditions.
Thank you.
Is there any, I'll ask for a commitment, but shall I have a commitment? Is there any intent that the developer has with regard to the sequencing of the development of commercial versus the residential? In other words, are you going to want to build all the apartments and get them rented out before you build the commercial? Is the commercial going in first? Can you say anything about that?
It's always ideal, like everyone wants it to happen at the same time because you're holding on to land and you're trying to execute as quickly as possible. It's also less disruptive for either side. Unfortunately, it's difficult to guarantee that one will happen before the other. We have a specific developer already for the multifamily. We don't have tenants yet, and so I think it's likely that the retail will lag behind the residential, just as customary in the market.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I got one for Blair. This, in the petition, there's a section vested rights. It's a 7-year vested rights. Can you explain that for the public and what's your take on that?
Understanding is that the vested rights, in other words, that what's being adopted is good for 7 years, and if they have not built out at that time, then it's void, but I'm not
No.
sure.
Cindy, being the attorney, can probably answer best.
Yeah.
I can take a stab at saying vested rights protect you for up to 7 years under state law when you've got a project of this size and mix of uses, that the local government can't come in and downzone you to something else. And so it's a way to protect your rights. When the 7-year period expires, if they make a change, if Waxhaw changes their ordinance and says all multi-use trails need to now be 20 feet wide instead of 10, we would have to meet newer ordinance requirements and adjust to the new ordinance. Is that fair?
And would they be,
That was a good
Cindy,
explanation. I agree with it.
and would they be grandfathered in if they built some portion of the project or all of it? I mean, they
Well,
would,
by statute.
or some of it, I guess.
Well, by statute, for multi-phase development over a certain acreage, they're entitled to a 7-year vesting period. But there's also common law vesting, which is if you start a project, then you're vested by common law.
Yeah.
So there's 2 types of vesting, but they're the same.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
I guess I'll ask this as a question. It's really a concern, but I'd like to give the developer a chance to help me understand a different perspective. It feels like the requested rezoning is asking the town to accept fairly high-density housing, which there are definitely advantages, although we haven't really talked about having the more efficient use of land to provide housing stock in a time when housing stock is in demand. I think that's a good thing. But the specific rezoning request is asking for us to trade away the EC zoning, which wouldn't have had any residential added to the burden of a fast-growing town, in exchange for a very small percentage of the property being commercial. In fact, smaller than the guidance for the land use would have been just 10%, not even at the 20% level. So that's what I'm wrestling with a little bit, and I'd love to hear maybe your perspective on the more pros around it.
Absolutely. Overall, I mean, it's over 1,000 acres when you look at everything that's out here. And so EC does allow for residential. I think, and I can't speak for staff or the staff that was in place at the time or the planning director or manager, but the thought, as I understand it, was that they knew that residential was an important component to an employment center, but they wanted it to be done with intentionality. And so when we look at the site, it's right on the edge, so it won't be in the middle of any future employment center, to your point earlier about the mix of uses and research and development and other uses. This provides a transition from the existing uses into the employment center. So it's sort of, as I mentioned, it unlocks by starting to provide that gap in the parkway, starts to create that connection. Unfortunately or fortunately, rooftops tend to be what's needed most in terms of providing for retail and creating that other synergy. And so we really believe that this is a good way to start an activity in the employment center. And to your point, we are in a housing shortage, both in the rental community and in the for sale community. And so we're happy to try to fill some of that gap.
Is there any opportunity to incorporate conditions that relate to, I know you're not ready to come out with the plan for the rest of the, did you say 1,000 acres? Is that? But, you know, I think if, to your point about a unified plan, if the big picture was that the bulk of the housing for the economic center, you know, is in this section, and we're not looking at, you know, 3 more wedges of 400, 500 more units. You know, that's a huge difference in terms of
There was a glimpse of
gross.
it. There was a glimpse of it on one of the drawings. I
Yes.
saw the.
Oh, really?
The
I
grayed out
swear I
part?
saw a building named Kroger on there. Did I not see that? Or maybe it was something else. It was just for a blink of an eye I
You did see
saw.
one of our plans showed a sort of bleeding over. So unfortunately, we can't commit to something legally on this rezoning that's tied to a different piece of property. And so I think the only thing we can tell you, as I mentioned, Typar is the owner and developer, and their intention is much larger on the whole site.
I think your choice of words as unlocks is appropriate, because eventually we'll get to build some commercial in this town. Eventually.
Maybe.
I know some
And
people
that's
who
where
are interested.
That's where I struggle. I mean, I think we're seeing like a piece of the puzzle and not the entire puzzle.
And this piece has been coming up.
Yeah, this isn't
A
the
lot.
first time we've looked at something like this and got to, you know, hey, we're going to build the road for you, but we're going to have to put in rooftops, but we're going to take out, you know, a section of your employment center.
And we're still waiting on that commercial
Right.
part of it.
Right. Well, are we good with the questions? Any more questions? I would like to open this for any public comments. If you have anybody who would like to speak for about 3 minutes.
Can I say one more
I'm
thing
sorry,
about?
sure.
Sorry, Mr. Taylor. One of the things that's precluded some of the property owners that are a little bit further down on the parkway was that you couldn't get to their site. And so back to the unlocked, there are some parties interested in commercial that we're almost waiting for this to happen because it can get to some pieces on the southern side of the parkway that have commercial interest. I know you've heard it, but I can tell you what I've.
We're gonna
So
we're
14
gonna
months ago, somebody stood there and told us the exact same.
and we're gonna sit here for the next hour to listen to those ideas from staff. That's a
Thank
joke,
you.
by the way.
Thank you. So I suppose there are no public comments.
I don't see any.
Okay. Do you want to clarify with Blair about what's in here and what he wants us to do?
Blair, question for you. On the agenda, we're just the recommended action is for review and provide feedback from the board. You put the requested action. I thought maybe that was part of the presentation for another time. Are we looking to vote on this tonight?
The requested action is motion to recommend with modifications, or deny recommendation. So I have those up now.
Okay.
Well, anything else?
I'm not sure whether, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll get the party started.
I may have misunderstood you. We have
The agenda
a
calls for.
staff recommendation as well, if that's what you were referring to.
No, if you look in the agenda, it says recommended action is to review and provide feedback.
What's that? Review and
Right.
provide feedback.
But you're
Yeah,
looking for a motion.
Yeah, because usually there's a
Yeah.
motion in there on
Usually
the
so.
agenda.
Yeah, and that,
Okay.
that should be there as well. Yeah.
Okay.
That's an error.
Well,
Now you can get the party started.
Well, I'm going to make a motion to deny the recommendation of conditional rezoning CD 006-2024 for views at Olivia based on it's not reasonable and it's not consistent with the current land use map. And if you go back to the consistency statement, I could probably read more into it. Or I can just leave it as is.
Legal.
Am I? Yeah, not consistent with the 2024 comprehensive plan, and it's not reasonable in the public interest as it does not meet the minimum requirements based on a reduction in parking. It's underneath the 20 to 60% commercial space, and for that reason, I made the motion to deny.
Anybody second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Well, do we need to?
This is a deny.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Let's have some discussion.
We're going back and forth between motions about recommending or not and the reasonable and consistency, and I'm not sure which motion is necessary and which motion we're on. So like right on the screen right now is
The necessary one, as I understand.
I read it all together.
You did read it all together, which is
Yeah.
fine. So there's a motion on the floor, and would you like for him to bifurcate that motion?
yes, I think
Okay.
so.
Could you restate your motion in two separate motions?
Thank you. I'll make the motion for the, on the reason.
Can I, if you're comfortable with it, like these are easier for me to vote on than the reasonable and consistent one, and I'm not sure the reasonable and consistent are necessary if we are about to
I
deny the
think we
recommendation.
do have to vote on both, though.
You do.
Could they do it as one motion, just as John did? He made a motion to deny the recommendation based off of the consistency statement
We've done
of
that
X, Y, Z.
before.
Yeah.
Yes, he can do
Okay.
that. I thought that Rick was asking for it to be separate motions, but
Gotcha.
it can be one motion, and that's the motion that's on the floor right now.
Yep. So John made a motion as one for the denial, and then included the reasonableness and consistency statement with that. So as Cindy was alluding to, you could do it as two, or you could do it as one. I think we've typically done it as one,
That's what
depending
we've
on
done.
what the recommendation
Let me
is.
ask this question. Does North Carolina law allow us to deny the recommendation even if it is consistent and reasonable?
So one of the facets of conditional zoning is that it's a legislative process. So it is at your discretion to make a recommendation at your discretion, even if if the board doesn't see it as consistent or reasonable, they just have to make a statement as such and give the reasonings why. So this legislative process gives you that opportunity and that discretion at your own will.
Okay, thank you.
There just has to be a rational basis for your denial.
Okay.
And you've already stated one.
Thank you.
Right. So,
Motion seconded.
and then I'll get the vote.
Yeah, so you would then do an overall vote on the motion that is on the table.
Right.
That's what
So could just,
Yeah, I will ask for that.
okay.
So if there's no further discussion, you could call for a
No,
vote.
I've already done it. He's already said no.
Oh, he has already put the motion on
He
table.
put the, John
seconded
put the
it.
motion on the table, and you don't necessarily need a second, you just need to make a overall vote.
Okay, all in favor of the motion?
I want to make sure, did you get the discussion you would like?
So we're looking at the wrong one, right? So you made a proposal on.
It's all together.
It's all together.
It's all together, Rick.
Okay, I guess I would prefer to split them if it's okay. So if you go, we could do, for example, I would make I don't want to override
No,
your motion.
I get where you're going. I'm having trouble verbalizing what I would do for the
Splitting it.
first, yeah.
Splitting that.
Okay, so if you want to split it, then I would say you start with the motion that is on the screen.
Yes.
Right.
Take a vote.
I can do that.
And then you go, and then you adopt a consistent, is that okay, Cindy?
Well, I think it's cleaner to withdraw your motion. Withdraw the motion that's on the floor now. And then if you want to make a motion to deny and split it, you make a motion to deny because of the reasons listed on the next screen. But, I mean, there's a motion on the floor to deny. There's a second, even though you don't need a second. And if there's no further discussion, you can call for a vote. But,
Yeah.
Rick, is
As
there
a
further
point
discussion?
of order, I'd like to call
Right.
for a vote.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessary. I don't know that it's material. So if you'd like to go for the vote, go ahead.
Just the vote now?
Call for vote.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
And then
20.
all those
All
opposed, then you do, yeah.
All opposed.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
And the motion passes to deny, yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Moving on, or we have to, be done with this
We're
stuff?
going, yeah, we're going to move on to number 2.
Moving on to item number 2, I invite Janet to present the consideration of the tax amendment.
Okay, good evening. I'm Janet Perano, your Senior Preservation Planner. I promise not to drag this out as long.
You're fine. You take all the time you need.
Okay. So we have a text amendment here tonight for deconstruction. And this is a request by your Planning Department to amend the Land Development Code, Section 12.2, Section D, to allow for a deconstruction plan prior to the demolition of a structure that has been determined to be contributing to a National Register Historic District or designated as a local landmark or within a local historic district. So deconstruction is a process where buildings are carefully taken apart with the goal of salvaging as many materials and components as possible with a focus on preserving the elements that can be reused, recycled, or restored. There are several benefits of deconstruction. Probably the most important is preservation. Deconstruction helps to preserve the key historical elements, architectural features like woodwork or decorative plaster, ceilings, building materials, and historic fixtures and fittings like light fixtures or doors or windows or hardware. You can see on the screen, the building on the top is the Tyson store that was demolished last year. Some of the important features of that building were the prism glass transoms above the store windows there. That was the only building in town that had that prism glass and was not saved. On the interior, there were tin ceilings in there, beautiful tin ceilings that were demolished when the building was torn down. And the picture in the lower corner is the post office, the original post office in town. That building was deconstructed. We did try to convince the property owner not to demolish that building, but she chose to, and that wood is now part of a shed in her brother's backyard. So at least it was reused. Another benefit to deconstruction is waste reduction. Construction and demolition waste accounts for 1/3 of all solid waste in the United States. Building material reuse rate is less than 1% of all construction and demolition waste. So if we can find a way to help close that system and make it more of a circular system and reuse these materials instead of everything winding up in a landfill, that would be a good thing. And another benefit of deconstruction is public health. Particles from demolition can travel up to 600 feet. There are some towns that have a requirement to do a wet demolition where you're hosing down the materials so that they're not floating in the air. Some of these old buildings contain asbestos or lead, so demolishing them can allow those particles to get into the air and can be a health hazard. So the requested change is in red on the screen. We're adding the word deconstruction to relocation, demolition, or destruction. And I'll just skip down to the bottom. During such a period, we can delay demolition for up to 365 days, and during that period, the HPC may negotiate with the owner and with any other parties in an effort to find a means of preserving the building or site, and we want to include or identifying salvageable materials of historical or architectural value. And then continuing on, when demolition is approved for any structure individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places or deemed to be contributing to a National Register Historic District or individually listed as a landmark or within a local historic district, the HPC shall evaluate whether deconstruction is feasible and may request a deconstruction plan. And the purpose of the plan is to encourage the salvage and reuse of historic or architecturally significant materials and reduce landfill waste. And the required action this evening is a motion for a favorable recommendation and the reasonableness and consistency statement, which says that the text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future planning goals of the town of Waxhaw. It is reasonable and in the public interest in that it encourages preservation of historic and architectural elements, provides a source of affordable building materials for renovations of historic structures or reuse in other projects, and reduces landfill waste. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is this just part of a text code upgrade, or is there an overriding or a more urgent need that precipitated this change?
Well, it started with a webinar that HPC watched that talked about deconstruction at a bigger level. San Antonio, Texas has a plan where they require deconstruction. They don't demolish buildings, they deconstruct everything. So we thought, well, how can we make that appropriate in Waxhaw? We don't have a lot of demolitions, but we do have a few. We have several members of the community who do woodworking or other construction projects that have expressed an interest in being able to get some of these salvage materials. I have one particular person in mind who had called the planning department and asked that we keep him informed when there is demolition, because his plan was more to preserve the history. So, for instance, Emerson project, the Howie Farm, his intent would be to take something from that original building and preserve it, and then present it to the Howie family and say, this is, a memory of the farmland that's been in your family. But yet there are several people who have expressed interest in this, and the Museum of the Waxhaws has also said that they would be willing to take some of the materials and store them. We have a project right now that we're in discussion with for downtown, a facade grant that they need a door. They need a wooden door that could possibly have been saved from that Tyson building that was demolished. So there are opportunities to reuse some of this material.
Cool.
Has HPC weighed into this?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I didn't update that slide. But yes, at their meeting last week, HPC heard this and voted unanimously to recommend approval.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Rick?
Would this only affect things in the historic preservation district,
Yes.
whatever it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I'm replacing a door right now. I don't need to give it to you, do I?
I didn't hear you.
I'm replacing a door right now. I don't need to give it to you, do you?
Your historic home.
You know, I've been here 17 years. It's
Yeah, I was
almost
gonna say,
historic.
from
Almost
late-
there.
late 2020.
For Waxhaw, that might be historic for the folks.
No, the only thing I ask is to go back a slide so we can wrap this up.
Oh, yep. Sorry.
Yep.
I make a motion for a favorable recommendation of the text amendment TA-019-2025 and the reasonable consistency statement of that this text amendment request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future planning goals for the town of Waxhaw. is reasonable and in the public, in that it encourages the preservation of historic and architectural elements, provides a source of affordable building materials for renovations of historic structures or reuse in other projects, and reduces landfill waste.
I can second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think the next item was work session. I don't think we needed any further right now. The next is, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
You guys let me do that every time. You're the best. You're the best.